The kitchen smelled like rosemary and something Margaret had brought uninvited. A casserole, opinion. It was hard to separate the two. Claire had spent the afternoon arranging things, flowers in low vases, candles that wouldn't feel like a statement, through that said, "We are comfortable here," without saying it too loudly. The rehearsal dinner had gone well. Her own mother had cried twice. Daniel had looked at her across the table the way he sometimes did, like he was still surprised by his own luck. Then the guests filtered out and Margaret stayed. She stayed the way certain women stay, not because they were asked, but because leaving would mean relinquishing the last word. She moved through Claire's kitchen slowly, touching the counter edge, glancing at the cabinet fronts, tilting her head at the tile work the way a contractor assesses damage before quoting a number. Claire poured 2 glasses of wine. She set one in front of Margaret without being asked. "You married down," Margaret said. "Not cruelly. That was the thing." She said it the way someone reports weather, "It'll rain Thursday," a neutral delivery for a sentence that was anything but. She was looking at the backsplash when she said it, as if Claire weren't quite worth the eye contact. Claire smiled. She handed her the wineglass and said nothing. What Margaret didn't know, what she had no reason to suspect, because she had underestimated the kind of woman who smiles and says nothing, was that Claire had already seen the prenuptial agreement, not because Daniel had shown her. Because Daniel's lawyer had sent the draft to the wrong email address, a typo, 1 letter off, and Claire's inbox had received it on a Tuesday morning while she was eating toast. She had read it carefully. Then she had forwarded it to her own attorney and waited. Daniel hadn't known about the forward. What he had known, what he told Claire 3 weeks later, over dinner, slightly embarrassed, slightly relieved, was that his mother had asked him to have her sign it and he had refused. "It didn't feel right," he said. "It felt like something she was asking for herself, not for us." Claire had nodded. She had not told him about the email. She had simply noted what his refusal meant and filed it somewhere useful. The wedding was in September. Margaret cried at the ceremony, which surprised no one, and smiled at the reception, in a way that suggested she was managing a situation rather than enjoying one. She was gracious to Claire's parents. She complimented the flowers. She touched Daniel's arm too many times, each touch a small, unconscious act of reclamation. Claire danced. She laughed at the right moments. She was not performing happiness. She was genuinely happy, in the way people are happy when they understand exactly where they stand. The marriage was not a fairy tale, which meant it was real. There were good years and grinding months. Daniel traveled for work. Claire built her consulting practice from a 2nd bedroom into a proper office, then into a small firm with 4 employees and a reputation that arrived before she did in most rooms. Margaret remained a consistent presence. Sunday dinners, holiday assumptions, advice distributed like a public service to anyone who hadn't asked. She never repeated the kitchen comment. But she didn't need to. It lived in the architecture of how she spoke to Claire. The slight pause before deferring to her opinion, the way she addressed questions to Daniel, even when Claire was the one who knew the answer, the particular tone she used when referencing Claire's work, her little business, as though diminutive adjectives were a form of encouragement. Daniel loved his wife. Daniel loved his mother. He lived for 2 years in the generous space between those two facts, believing that space would hold indefinitely. It didn't hold because of a fight, or dramatic confrontation, or any of the things people expect. It held until a Thursday in November, when Claire's firm was retained by a mid-sized regional bank to audit the financial practices of 3 companies under review for a pending merger. Standard work, the kind of thing her firm did 6 times a year. One of the 3 companies was the interior design consultancy that Margaret had co-founded in 1997 and still partially owned. Claire recused herself from that specific file, immediately and in writing, and assigned it to her most thorough associate. She disclosed the conflict of interest to the bank's legal team the same afternoon. She did not call Margaret. She did not tell Daniel until the following Sunday over coffee in the same kitchen where the comment had been made. She told him plainly, the way she told him most things, without drama, without emphasis, the way you report weather. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "She doesn't know yet," Claire said. "No," he said. "She'll find out when the report is filed." He nodded slowly. He was not a stupid man. He understood, in that moment, several things at once: the shape of his mother's behavior over 2 years, the patience it had required, and the particular quality of his wife's composure, which he had always admired but perhaps never fully understood until now. "You didn't have to recuse yourself," he said. "You could have just managed it." "I know," Claire said. "That's why I did it." The report was filed 6 weeks later. It found nothing criminal, some irregular bookkeeping, some recommendations. Margaret's firm was cleared in the merger, with conditions. There was no scandal, no ruin. Only a phone call that Margaret placed to Daniel that Claire learned about secondhand, a conversation in which Margaret had apparently said very little and listened a great deal. She did not call Claire. Claire did not wait for the call. On a Wednesday morning, 3 days after the report was filed, she drove to work with the radio on. A song she half recognized. Traffic on the bridge moving slowly and then opening up, the way it sometimes does, for no reason you can name. She thought about the kitchen, the casserole, the wine glass she had filled and offered without being asked. You married down. She had smiled then because she already knew something Margaret didn't. She smiled then because she already knew something Margaret didn't. She smiled now because she still did. Not triumph, not quite. Something quieter and more durable. The particular satisfaction of a woman who never needed the last word because she had spent 2 years holding something better. The bridge opened. The traffic moved. She turned up the radio and drove.